Hey, welcome back to Sober Now. I'm Jim LaPierre. Today I want to tackle kind of a difficult topic. I want to talk about moral injury. Moral injury is coming to the forefront in psychology as something we need to appreciate and understand. It's very different from the way that we've thought about burnout and compassion fatigue and all of the things that people who work in the healing and helping professions ultimately are faced with. When we talk about burnout, there's a certain amount of stigma that's attached to it, and we think of it as the failure or the shortcoming of an individual to properly care for themselves. The concept of moral injury is very different. That concept says, well, it's not the fault of the individual. It's the fault of the institution, it's the fault of the field, it's the fault of the employer. And even hearing myself say that, it's really not so much about blame. It's about looking at the naked truth about what it is that we experience in the healing and helping professions. What's expected of us quite often is too much. The simple truth is we work in systems that are broken. We bear witness to pain and suffering, and it takes a gradual toll. And so while self-care is an enormously important part of that, the degree to which we care for each other has everything to do with the sustainability and manageability of continuing in our chosen careers. I think quite often of a quote that perhaps you've heard, but it might surprise you who said it. The quote is, "We the unwilling, led by the unknowing, are doing the impossible for the ungrateful. We have done so much for so long with so little that we are now qualified to do anything with nothing." Those are perhaps some of the most sarcastic but earnest words I've ever heard spoken, and they were spoken by Mother Teresa. I think we tend to think of her as a bit of a saint, and appropriately so. She did an enormous amount of good in the world. But some of the stories that have surfaced since her death show some important lessons. She did great good in the world, and her example is incredible. But the way that she went about doing great good was with an incredible understanding of how systems work and how they fail and how they're designed to fail. She had a great understanding of greed and of evil, and she was able to persuade and influence people in a way that did the greatest amount of good possible. And I see that as heroic, but I also see it as necessary. When you work in unhealthy systems, it's hard enough just to stay sane. But as healers and helpers, we're driven to achieve optimal outcomes. We're driven to provide care and comfort to those we support. And there's this contrast that's usually so staggering between who a healer is to others and who they are to themselves. And my hope, especially for the people that I supervise and mentor, is that they come to be as good to themselves as they are to those they serve. And that is no small order. I joke sometimes that I'm a slow learner with a high pain tolerance. The lessons that my higher power most wants me to learn are things that I resist. And they're very simple things, like having respect for my own limits. My experience is that those of us who have great empathy for others lack compassion for ourselves, and I have been guilty of that countless times. And the result of my lack of self-care, the lack of support that I allowed into my life, and the result of working in distinctly unhealthy systems was burnout. And I did that multiple times. And I don't do it anymore. And I overcame burnout not because it was a good idea, but because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so now I work very hard to teach people the lessons that I've learned, because I think the best type of wisdom, arguably, is learning from other people's mistakes. And I think all healers and helpers want this. We earnestly want good things to come out of the shit that we've been through, because it gives more meaning, not to how we've suffered, but to how we overcame. And ideally, we share our experience, strength, and hope with each other. And ideally, we build each other up. But I think it's the discussion that's emerging around moral injury is a very important one, because I have worked for distinctly sick cultures. I have worked in workplaces where competition was the norm and not collaboration. I think the truth about healthcare and nonprofits in general is that we're not supporting each other. We're competing with each other, which is tragic in a sense. So, if we turn our attention to how unhealthy the system is, we can try to change the system, which I'm not really invested in. I applaud those who are. I want to work within the system and make investments in people that I believe have great potential and great ability to do good in the world. And I think ultimately that's what changes the system, not the right policy, not changing the laws. And again, those things all have value. I think they're important, but I don't believe that they're what will right what's wrong in healthcare, what's wrong in the social services. I think what's going to make that change is, if you don't mind me saying so, a revolution from within, where we choose to support our brothers and sisters, where we choose to allow ourselves to receive support. And I recognize that that's very hard. If you're anything like me, you're much better at giving than you are at getting. But I've learned a lot of lessons about sustainability, and I've learned that when I just continuously give and don't allow myself to receive, that's not only unsustainable, it's also selfish. If all I do is give to people and don't allow them to give to me, that's not reciprocity, that's not healthy, and it's not the type of relationships that I want in my life today. So these are some painful lessons, but I think really important ones. And I don't see anything much in the world that suggests to me that the systems are going to be changing, whether it's corrections or the judicial system or child protective services or any of the other systems that interface with the most vulnerable of people. And so what is most compelling to me is to take care of myself and others, and to join and connect with others who are on similar missions. And so while I always urge you to take care of you, I ask you to do a little extra today, and ideally we'll embrace a form of leadership where sharing our experience with others and allowing them to have reciprocity with us and to meet each other's needs results in subcultures and subsystems within this structure that are healthy, that do endure, and that make things better. So, as always, I welcome topics that you'd like discussed, questions that you'd like answered, and you can connect with me, jim@sobernow.com. Always love hearing from you, and expect a lot more on this topic. I know that a lot of us, whether we're in early recovery and considering a career change, I talk to folks all the time who want to take on a new career or go back to school. I talk to folks all the time who are in the field and struggling with addiction. Wherever you're at in your journey, let's look at ways to make it healthier and more sustainable and connect with each other. Thanks. Have a great day.